Long before it became the soundtrack of movie theaters, fast food counters, and convenience stores, soda was something altogether different. It was poured into delicate glasses by pharmacists instead of cashiers. It was prescribed rather than advertised. It was believed to heal the body before it came to define modern indulgence. Today, billions of servings of carbonated soft drinks are consumed every single day, making soda one of the most recognizable products on Earth. Few other beverages have traveled so completely across borders, languages, and cultures. Yet behind every fizzing bubble lies a story far larger than a simple drink. It is a story of scientific curiosity and accidental discovery. A story of colonial sugar plantations that reshaped continents. A story of industrial machines capable of bottling millions of drinks each day. A story of advertising campaigns so powerful they transformed a luxury into an everyday ritual. Entire fortunes were built on carbonation and sweetness. Governments taxed it. Companies fought over it. Wars helped spread it. Public health debates continue to revolve around it. What appears to be an ordinary can resting in a refrigerator represents centuries of chemistry, commerce, labor, and persuasion. Every ingredient carries a history. The water, the bubbles, the sugar, the flavorings, even the bottle itself. Each emerged from different moments in human history before coming together in one of the world's most successful products. It was never just soda. Its story stretches from ancient mineral springs to modern megafactories, from small pharmacies to multinational corporations worth hundreds of billions of dollars. To understand how soda changed the world, we need to go back, long before the first bottle was ever opened. Long before factories learned to manufacture bubbles, nature had already mastered the art. Across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia, underground geological activity forced carbon dioxide through layers of mineral-rich rock before it dissolved into natural spring water. As the water emerged at the surface, it carried tiny sparkling bubbles unlike anything found in ordinary rivers or wells. These unusual springs became places of fascination thousands of years ago. Ancient civilizations often regarded bubbling water as something sacred. Among the Greeks, mineral springs were associated with healing sanctuaries dedicated to the gods. The Romans expanded this tradition, constructing elaborate bathhouses around naturally carbonated springs throughout their empire. Water from places like modern-day Germany and Italy was believed to restore strength, improve digestion, and cure a surprising range of illnesses. Whether those medical claims were true mattered less than what people believed. In an age before modern chemistry, bubbles suggested that something mysterious lived inside the water. The sensation on the tongue felt alive. It hinted at invisible forces hidden beneath the earth. As trade routes expanded across Europe during the Middle Ages, knowledge of these springs spread with travelers, monks, physicians, and merchants. Pilgrims journeyed long distances to drink mineral water believed to possess miraculous properties. Wealthy families collected it in heavy stoneware containers, attempting to transport its healing qualities home, although much of its carbonation disappeared during the journey. For centuries, the secret remained locked inside nature itself. The great breakthrough arrived during Europe's scientific revolution. The 17th century transformed the study of invisible gases. Scientists began questioning phenomena that previous generations had explained through philosophy or religion. Air itself, once considered empty space, became an object worthy of investigation. Among those fascinated by this invisible world was the English scientist Joseph Black, who identified what he called fixed air in the 1750s. This gas, later known as carbon dioxide, appeared during fermentation and certain chemical reactions. It was heavier than ordinary air and possessed unusual properties that intrigued researchers across Europe. One of those researchers was Joseph Priestley. Living near a brewery in Leeds during the 1760s, Priestley noticed something remarkable. Fermenting beer released invisible clouds of carbon dioxide. Curious about the gas, he suspended bowls of water above brewing vats. The water gradually absorbed the gas, creating an entirely new sensation, sparkling water. In 1772, Priestley published instructions describing how anyone might reproduce the effect artificially. It was a scientific achievement more than a commercial invention, but its implications were profound. Humanity no longer needed rare mineral springs. Bubbles could now be manufactured almost anywhere. The discovery quietly changed history. For the first time, carbonation had become portable. Artificial mineral water spread among Europe's physicians, many of whom still believed sparkling water possessed therapeutic value. Patients suffering from digestive complaints, kidney ailments, or general fatigue were encouraged to drink it as a healthier alternative to contaminated urban water supplies. Hospitals, spas, and clinics increasingly experimented with carbonated beverages. But there remained a problem. Carbonated water alone tasted clean and refreshing, yet it lacked excitement. If bubbles were to move beyond medicine and become something people genuinely desired, they needed companions. Those companions arrived in the form of flavor, sweetness, and entrepreneurship. Few people embodied that transformation better than Johann Jacob Schweppe. Originally trained as a watchmaker, Schweppe possessed the precision required to solve a difficult engineering challenge, producing carbonated water consistently on a commercial scale. During the 1780s, he refined methods that made sparkling water more stable during bottling, allowing it to survive transportation without losing as much carbonation. His company would become one of the earliest commercial producers of carbonated mineral water, proving that bubbles could become a business rather than merely a scientific curiosity. Meanwhile, pharmacists across Europe and the United States began experimenting with flavored syrups. Herbal extracts, fruit juices, spices, citrus oils, vanilla, ginger, and medicinal roots were mixed in a sparkling water, creating beverages that blurred the line between remedy and refreshment. The 19th century witnessed the rise of the soda fountain. These ornate marble counters became fixtures inside pharmacies, where trained druggists mixed drinks by hand using carbonated water, flavored syrups, and carefully measured ingredients. Customers gathered not only to seek medicine, but to socialize. The soda fountain evolved into one of the earliest public spaces where people of different backgrounds could share a fashionable drink. The timing could not have been better. Industrial sugar refining had dramatically lowered the cost of sweetness. What had once been an expensive luxury reserved for elites gradually became affordable to ordinary consumers. Sweetened, sparkling drinks suddenly appealed not just because they promised health, but because they tasted extraordinary. Inventors continued expanding the possibilities. Ginger beer, root beer, sarsaparilla, cream soda, and countless regional recipes emerged throughout the 19th century. Many claimed medicinal benefits, containing botanical extracts believed to improve digestion, calm nerves, or restore energy. Some included caffeine from cola nuts or tea leaves. Others contained coca leaf extracts before regulations eventually changed their formulas. Consumers often struggled to distinguish medicine from recreation. That ambiguity became one of soda's greatest strengths. A refreshing drink could also be marketed as healthy. A pleasant flavor could be presented as therapeutic. The pharmacy became both clinic and cafe, and soda occupied both worlds simultaneously. By the late 19th century, entrepreneurs recognized an opportunity far greater than selling flavored water. Carbonation was no longer the remarkable innovation. The real revolution lay in combining science, sweetness, branding, and mass production into a product people would seek out again and again. The age of modern soda was about to begin. The rise of soda is often told as a triumph of chemistry. In reality, it was equally a triumph of sugar. Without sweetness, carbonation might have remained an amusing scientific novelty, confined to pharmacies and mineral spas. Sugar transformed sparkling water into something people craved, and sugar, by the 19th century, had become one of the most powerful commodities on Earth. Its journey began long before the first soda fountain. Sugarcane originated in Southeast Asia and spread westward over centuries through India, Persia, and the Arab world. By the late 15th century, European explorers had discovered that tropical islands across the Atlantic offered ideal conditions for cultivation. What followed was one of history's largest agricultural expansions. The Caribbean became the center of a new economic system. Islands such as Barbados, Jamaica, Saint Domingue, and Cuba were transformed into vast sugar-producing colonies. Forests disappeared beneath endless fields of cane. European empires competed fiercely to control these islands, not because of their size, but because of the immense wealth they generated. Sugar quickly became known as white gold. Producing it, however, required staggering amounts of labor. Sugarcane had to be planted, cut, transported, crushed, boiled, refined, and shipped within narrow time windows before the crop spoiled. Plantation owners sought the cheapest labor possible, fueling the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, millions of enslaved Africans were forced across the Atlantic, many destined for sugar plantations where brutal working conditions and high mortality rates became tragically commonplace. The sweetness enjoyed in European drawing rooms carried an invisible human cost. It was never just sugar. As production increased, prices fell. What had once been an exotic luxury for aristocrats slowly entered the diets of merchants, laborers, and eventually entire nations. Sweet tea, coffee, chocolate, pastries, jams, and later soft drinks all became possible because sugar was no longer scarce. This was the first great zoom-out moment in soda's history. The drink itself had not yet conquered the world, but the ingredient that would define it already had. The 19th century accelerated this transformation. Steam-powered mills processed cane more efficiently than ever before. Railroads connected plantations to ports. Iron-hulled steamships crossed oceans on predictable schedules, shrinking travel times and lowering transportation costs. Advances in refining produced cleaner, whiter sugar at industrial scales. At the same time, sugar beet cultivation expanded across Europe, particularly after the Napoleonic Wars disrupted access to Caribbean supplies. Governments invested heavily in domestic sugar industries, ensuring that sweetness no longer depended entirely on overseas colonies. The global sugar market diversified, but demand continued to soar. Into this world stepped the soda fountain. Every flavored syrup relied on abundant sugar. Every glass sold in a pharmacy represented not only carbonation, but an international network of farmers, refiners, merchants, shipping companies, insurers, and financiers. A seemingly simple drink connected distant plantations with bustling American cities and European capitals. By the late 19th century, soda manufacturers were no longer merely mixing beverages. They were participating in one of the largest commodity systems ever created. This changed everything. The emergence of bottled soda expanded the market beyond local fountains. Carbonated drinks could now travel by rail to towns without pharmacies. Rural communities gained access to beverages once available only in cities. Refrigeration, improved glass manufacturing, and reliable bottle caps made distribution increasingly practical. Entrepreneurs recognized that the future belonged not to local recipes, but to recognizable brands. A consistent flavor could travel farther than any individual pharmacist. Consumers began trusting names as much as ingredients. The humble glass of sparkling water had entered the age of global commerce. Yet every bottle concealed another story. Industrial abundance rarely arrives without industrial labor. Behind the polished advertisements of smiling families and refreshing drinks stood thousands of workers whose names never appeared on labels. Glass blowers labored beside furnaces that reached temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius. Before automated bottle-making machines arrived, skilled craftsmen worked exhausting shifts shaping molten glass by hand. The work was dangerous. Burns, cuts, and respiratory illnesses were common hazards of the trade. Inside sugar refineries, laborers operated crushing rollers, boiling vats, and centrifuges amid intense heat and airborne dust. Long hours defined factory life during the 19th century. Industrialization increased production, but it also demanded relentless discipline. The clock, not the seasons, now governed work. Bottling plants introduced another revolution. Rows of workers washed reusable bottles, inspected glass for cracks, filled containers with carbonated beverages, sealed them under pressure, applied paper labels, packed wooden crates, and loaded rail cars bound for distant markets. Every improvement in efficiency lowered costs and expanded demand, requiring even larger factories. Cities proved fertile ground for the new industry. Rapid urbanization created millions of customers seeking inexpensive refreshments after long workdays. Coal-powered factories filled the air with soot. Safe drinking water remained inconsistent in many industrial centers. Carbonated beverages, produced under controlled conditions, often appeared cleaner and more reliable than municipal water supplies. Advertising quickly adapted. Colorful posters promised vitality, cleanliness, and modern living. Soda became associated with progress itself. Bright storefronts, illuminated signs, and elegant soda fountains suggested that drinking sparkling beverages was part of participating in the future. Companies increasingly marketed soda toward families, women, and children rather than only patients. Refreshment replaced medicine as the central message. This subtle shift reshaped consumer culture. Instead of selling health alone, manufacturers sold emotion. They sold relaxation after work, celebration during holidays, companionship among friends, optimism during difficult times. A bottle could symbolize happiness long before anyone tasted its contents. Meanwhile, the infrastructure supporting soda continued expanding across continents. Railroads delivered sugar from refineries to syrup manufacturers. Timber companies supplied wooden crates. Mining operations extracted metals for bottle caps. Chemical industries refined preservatives and flavorings. Printers produced millions of colorful labels and newspaper advertisements. The soda industry became an enormous web connecting dozens of seemingly unrelated sectors. Its success depended upon engineers, chemists, factory workers, railway operators, sailors, advertisers, farmers, and retailers working together across thousands of miles. Another zoom-out moment emerges here. Soda did not simply reflect industrialization. It became one of its products and one of its engines. As demand exploded, competition intensified. Hundreds of regional soda companies appeared throughout Europe and North America. Most disappeared within decades, unable to scale production or establish recognizable identities. A handful, however, discovered that the greatest competitive advantage was no longer the recipe. It was the brand. That realization would redefine not only the beverage industry, but modern marketing itself. By the late 19th century, two inventions had matured simultaneously: mass production and mass advertising. Together, they prepared the stage for companies that would transform soda from a popular drink into one of history's most powerful global businesses. The next chapter belonged not to pharmacists, but to corporations, and they would change the taste of the 20th century forever. The 20th century did not simply make soda more popular, it reinvented it. By the 1880s, dozens of flavored carbonated drinks competed for customers across the United States. Most enjoyed only local success before disappearing. A few, however, understood that the future of soda depended not merely on flavor, but on identity. In 1886, an Atlanta pharmacist named John Stith Pemberton created a caramel-colored syrup intended to be mixed with carbonated water. It was first sold over the counter at a neighborhood pharmacy as a tonic, promising refreshment and relief from fatigue. His bookkeeper, Frank Mason Robinson, suggested the flowing script logo that would become one of the most recognizable trademarks in history. The drink was called Coca-Cola. At first, sales were modest. Only a handful of glasses were sold each day. But another businessman saw possibilities that reached far beyond a single pharmacy. Asa Griggs Candler purchased the rights to the formula and transformed the beverage into a national brand. Instead of relying on word of mouth, he invested aggressively in advertising. Calendars, clocks, serving trays, coupons, painted walls, and newspaper advertisements carried the company's name into homes across America. It was an extraordinary strategy. People did not simply buy a drink. They remembered a logo. Soon afterward came another breakthrough that changed the economics of soda forever: bottling. Until then, most soda was consumed at fountains. Bottles allowed beverages to travel hundreds of miles without losing their identity. Independent bottling franchises spread across towns and cities, each producing the same drink under strict standards. A customer could purchase a bottle in one state and expect it to taste nearly identical in another. Consistency became a product. The same transformation unfolded elsewhere. In 1898, pharmacist Caleb Bradham introduced Pepsi Cola, originally marketed as a digestive aid. Like many beverages of its era, it began inside a pharmacy before evolving into something much larger. Competition intensified. Companies no longer fought solely over recipes. They battled over shelf space, advertising, packaging, pricing, and public imagination. This changed everything. The early 20th century witnessed remarkable technological advances that made soda cheaper and more accessible than ever before. Automatic bottling lines replaced much of the manual labor that had once limited production. Mechanical refrigeration allowed beverages to remain cold during transportation and retail display. Improved crown caps preserved carbonation more effectively, extending shelf life. Meanwhile, advances in chemistry produced more reliable flavorings, preservatives, and quality controls. Every bottle leaving a factory became increasingly identical to the last. Industrial precision had entered the beverage business. Then came the First World War and, 2 decades later, the Second. Conflict reshaped global manufacturing, transportation, and logistics. During World War II, Coca-Cola's president, Robert Woodruff, made a bold promise. Every American service member, wherever stationed, should be able to purchase a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents. To fulfill that promise, the company helped establish dozens of bottling plants near military operations around the world. These facilities supplied troops during the war, but many remained after peace returned. The result was extraordinary. Military logistics unintentionally accelerated commercial globalization. Factories built for wartime demand became permanent footholds in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Millions of people encountered American soft drinks for the first time, not through advertising, but through the infrastructure of war. The beverage followed the flag. Afterward, it remained. This was another moment when an ordinary product intersected with world history. Soda became one of the many symbols accompanying the rise of the American century. The post-war economic boom only strengthened its position. Families purchased refrigerators in record numbers. Supermarkets expanded rapidly. Highways connected suburbs to cities. Vending machines appeared in schools, offices, factories, and train stations. Aluminum cans, introduced on a large scale during the 1960s, made transportation lighter and recycling easier than glass alone. Every technological improvement increased convenience. Every increase in convenience expanded consumption. Advertising evolved just as quickly. Companies no longer emphasized medicine. They sold aspiration. Television commercials portrayed smiling families at backyard barbecues, teenagers sharing drinks after school, athletes celebrating victory, and holiday gatherings centered around familiar bottles. Soda became associated with youth, friendship, freedom, and optimism. The liquid inside mattered, but the emotions surrounding it mattered even more. Marketing agencies invested millions researching consumer psychology. Colors, slogans, music, celebrity endorsements, and seasonal campaigns were carefully designed to build lifelong brand loyalty. By the middle of the 20th century, corporations had learned a remarkable lesson. People often chose stories before they chose flavors. If you're enjoying uncovering how an everyday drink became intertwined with science, empire, industry, and culture, consider subscribing. There are countless ordinary foods hiding extraordinary histories, and each one reveals a different chapter of the modern world. The rivalry between Coca-Cola and Pepsi soon became one of the most famous commercial competitions ever recorded. Price wars erupted during the Great Depression. Blind taste tests challenged consumer assumptions. Television advertising escalated into cultural spectacle. Sponsorships expanded into sports, music, and entertainment. Entire generations grew up identifying themselves with one brand or the other. Yet beneath this rivalry, both companies were building something even larger, a truly global supply chain. Sugar arrived from multiple continents. Aluminum came from bauxite mines refined into lightweight cans. Flavoring ingredients crossed oceans. Manufacturing equipment operated around the clock. Distribution fleets delivered products to millions of retailers every week. By the late 20th century, soda had become one of the most efficiently produced consumer goods in history. Its success depended upon chemistry, logistics, branding, industrial engineering, and marketing working in perfect coordination. What had begun as sparkling water inside a laboratory had evolved into a worldwide business measured not in bottles, but in billions. Yet unprecedented success brought new questions. As consumption climbed year after year, scientists, physicians, and governments began examining the long-term consequences of a beverage once promoted as a health tonic. The conversation surrounding soda was about to change once again. It would no longer be only a story of innovation. It would become a story of responsibility. The same drink that had conquered the global marketplace would now face scrutiny over its effects on human health, public policy, and the planet itself. And that legacy continues to shape the modern world. The extraordinary success of soda after the Second World War was not measured only by sales. It was measured by presence. By the closing decades of the 20th century, a bottle or can of soda could be found in bustling megacities, isolated villages, airports, cinemas, school cafeterias, sporting events, roadside diners, and supermarket aisles on nearly every continent. Few consumer products had achieved such remarkable geographic reach. What had begun as a medicinal tonic had become a global ritual. This transformation relied on far more than efficient factories. It depended on one of the most sophisticated marketing systems ever created. Soft drink companies understood that they were no longer simply competing against other beverages. They were competing for moments, for birthdays, family dinners, holidays, celebrations, sporting victories, and ordinary afternoons. Advertising rarely focused on ingredients. Instead, it sold memories before they even existed. A cold bottle became a symbol of friendship. A can opened at a picnic suggested freedom. A shared drink at a restaurant represented togetherness. The product itself remained largely unchanged, but its cultural meaning expanded with every campaign. The rise of television accelerated this process. Commercials reached millions of households simultaneously, embedding familiar logos, jingles, and slogans into everyday life. Sponsorships of international sporting events, concerts, and films ensured that soda accompanied many of the defining cultural moments of the late 20th century. Globalization amplified that influence. As multinational restaurant chains expanded into new markets, soda traveled alongside them. A meal increasingly came with a standardized drink, reinforcing consumption across generations. Distribution networks stretched from enormous automated bottling plants to neighborhood shops, making soda available with unprecedented speed and consistency. The modern supply chain became a marvel of coordination. Water was sourced locally but treated to exact specifications. Sweeteners arrived from global agricultural markets. Aluminum, plastic, cardboard, and glass moved through international manufacturing networks. Computerized logistics tracked shipments across oceans and highways, ensuring shelves remained stocked almost continuously. Billions of servings each week depended upon thousands of suppliers working in remarkable synchrony. It was one of the largest food distribution systems humanity had ever constructed. Yet as soda reached its greatest commercial success, scientific research began raising difficult questions. Throughout the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st, researchers increasingly examined the relationship between frequent consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and chronic health conditions. Rising rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, tooth decay, and cardiovascular disease prompted renewed attention to dietary sugar and calorie intake. Soda was hardly the only contributor to these complex public health trends. Modern diets had changed in countless ways. Physical activity patterns, portion sizes, and highly processed foods all played important roles. Nevertheless, soft drinks became one of the most visible symbols in a broader conversation about nutrition. Governments responded in different ways. Some countries introduced taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages in an effort to reduce consumption. Others required clearer nutritional labeling or restricted advertising aimed at children. Schools reconsidered vending machine contracts, while public health organizations encouraged increased water consumption. The industry adapted rather than disappeared. Companies invested heavily in low-calorie beverages, sugar-free formulations, flavored sparkling waters, and reduced sugar products. Artificial sweeteners and alternative ingredients expanded consumer choice, reflecting changing preferences rather than resisting them entirely. The story of soda had entered another phase of reinvention. But health was not the only challenge. Environmental concerns also became increasingly difficult to ignore. Plastic bottles, celebrated for being lightweight and inexpensive, contributed to a growing global waste problem when improperly discarded. Although recycling programs expanded in many regions, millions of bottles continued to enter landfills, rivers, and oceans every year. Manufacturing itself required substantial resources. Water, the primary ingredient in every bottle, became a subject of increasing scrutiny in regions facing drought or water scarcity. Energy was consumed at every stage, from producing packaging materials to transporting finished products across continents. Again, the issue extended far beyond soda alone. It reflected the broader environmental footprint of modern consumer culture. Even so, beverage companies found themselves under mounting pressure to redesign packaging, improve recycling rates, reduce emissions, and develop more sustainable production methods. The same innovation that had once focused entirely on growth was now increasingly directed toward efficiency and environmental responsibility. This was the final great transformation. Soda was no longer merely a product of science. It had become a product of accountability. Looking back across more than 2 centuries, the remarkable journey of soda becomes clear. Its story began with mysterious mineral springs bubbling from beneath ancient landscapes. It passed through the laboratories of Enlightenment scientists who learned to capture invisible gases. It relied upon sugar cultivated through global trade networks that reshaped economies and, too often, exploited human lives. It flourished during industrialization, when mechanized factories and railroads made mass production possible. It evolved into one of history's greatest branding successes, carried around the world through advertising, refrigeration, and globalization. Every era left its mark. The bubbles came from chemistry. The sweetness came from agriculture. The scale came from industry. The popularity came from marketing. And today's debates come from the consequences of all that came before. It was never just soda. It was a mirror reflecting the ambitions of each generation that produced it. Every chilled can waiting inside a refrigerator carries traces of ancient geology, scientific experimentation, colonial commerce, industrial engineering, corporate strategy, and modern public health. Few everyday objects contain so much history while appearing so ordinary. The next time carbonation rushes upward after a bottle is opened, those bubbles tell a story that began centuries before that moment. A story of curiosity, a story of commerce, a story of power, and ultimately, a story of how one simple drink became part of the fabric of modern civilization. If you enjoyed this journey through the hidden history of soda, consider subscribing for more documentaries uncovering the extraordinary histories behind the ordinary things we often overlook. Every ingredient, every crop, and every everyday object has a story waiting to be told. And now we'd love to hear from you. What part of soda's history surprised you the most? And what everyday food or drink should we uncover next?